Welcome back to
Hey,
the channel, Courtney. It's been a little while since you've been on here, but I think this is the third, maybe fourth time you've been on,
yeah,
reoccurring guest. So, which is always great to have you.
thank
Um,
you.
so you just came out with this new book. We talked a little bit about it. There it is. We talked a little bit about it last time, and I'm just going to give you the floor and allow you to sell your book to the audience. No, but just talk a little bit about what the book is, what the thesis is, and kind of what your goal is in writing it and all that, and even some of
All
the
right.
responses you've gotten so far and all that. So, floor is
Well,
yours.
the book is called The Final Betrayal: How Technocracy Destroyed America. And we have a cautionary tale in the middle. And we are hoping it is a cautionary tale,
Yeah,
although it is playing out in real time. And it was truly an honor to be a part of this. I co-authored this with Patrick Wood. For those who are not familiar, everyone should be, by the way. He
yeah,
is really, he's called the living expert on technocracy. I've learned a tremendous amount from him, and it has been really an honor to collaborate with him on this really important book, in my opinion. He found it very important that it be short. So you will see this is a big print. It is a pretty short book. I won't say it's a light read, but it is a short read. We do have an audio version that is only 3.5 hours, and it is recorded by a real human. She's a voiceover actress. She did a fantastic job, in my opinion. She was a huge fan of our work, and so she had reached out, and we had seen some of her, we'd listened to some of her samples, and I think she did a really fantastic job. But that tells you, I mean, a super long drive, or you
yeah.
could listen to the whole book. In some cases, the references were more pages than even the text itself in some of the chapters. So it's really meant to be a bird's eye view of what is going on in real time. And then there's copious sources for people to go and do their own further intellectual spelunking if they wish. But the purpose of this book is that I think that, before the election, we had this whole narrative of MAGA, and we thought that a lot of people in the populist movement or on the political, I put it in air quotes, political right, who identify as either conservatives, Republicans, sometimes libertarians or populists, just Trumpians, as they sometimes call them,
Right.
on the right. I really thought they were going to get MAGA, Make America Great Again. That was the slogan. And they thought that Trump's second term, he was going to have this free reign, and we were going to have a restoration of the Constitution, get closer to founding principles, this sort of thing was what was being touted. And unfortunately, what it looks like is instead he handed the keys to Silicon Valley. And so this narrative of MAGA really was, it looks like a movement to lure the masses through marketing, but it was hijacked in order to execute this technocracy. Which
Many
is really,
such cases.
yes. And we also, alongside MAGA, we had MAHA. Now, I don't know a single person who could argue with Make America Healthy Again.
Right.
I'm a huge proponent of owning your own health, pushing back against some of this big pharma, egregious agendas, and some of the, experimental types of pharmaceuticals that have been pushed previously. And I'm all about getting rid of, the seed oils. I personally have a seed oil allergy. I'm very supportive of getting rid of all of these pesticides, the glyphosate. We are one of the most glyphosate-ridden countries in the world. I've traveled to Europe quite a bit, and there they allow 3 endocrine disruptors in their food. We allow something like 1,800. It's an insane number.
Yeah.
So, these kinds of things I am all in favor of. But even prior to Trump being elected, I warned people that MAHA, Make America Healthy, and was probably a Trojan horse for AI precision medicine, because I know RFK Jr.'s history. He has invested as a partner in Vantage Point Capital, and that is a very, they're mostly centered around, environmental kind of energy quote unquote clean energy sources and technologies is what they claim to be mostly invested in, but they have a lot of ancillary investments and projects and partners that are tied to emerging technologies. So he personally has a lot to gain with the advancement of the biodigital convergence financially. And so AI precision medicine, which is not at all a new agenda. Obama was pushing this AI precision medicine. We have the NBIC document that came out of, I believe, Virginia in 2001. So these are not new initiatives. However, of course, we had the BRAIN initiative under Obama as well. But I knew that this was something he'd be very supportive of, and it did seem like it'd be a Trojan horse, and it looks like it absolutely is, because last year, RFK Jr. tweeted that part of MAHA is really MABA, Make America Biotech Accelerate. So there in the acronym, not good. Right there in the acronym, we have Accelerate, which is a derivative of the term accelerationism, which is a huge component of the philosophy of the Dark Enlightenment, which has been incredibly influential on the current Trump administration, and of course has been influential in Silicon Valley for decades. And so part of what he said as this MABA movement, Make America Biotech Accelerate, is that by the end of 2026, which is what we are in currently, every American should be equipped with a wearable. So this is, of course, tied to the Internet of Wearable, which is the Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything. And when 6G comes on the scene, we'll definitely be a part of the Internet of Nano Bio Things.
So get rid of your Apple Watches is the takeaway here.
Well, I definitely I would start by, if you do have an Apple Watch, look at all of these. You can go to your settings, and there's a lot of things you can toggle in terms of how much data gets exported, how much can be, localized. I would start there. That's a really good place to begin. There are some wearable technologies that don't have exportable, they're not interconnected either, just because they're newer, that might change. But, some of them, because they advocate data privacy. Yeah. And so you can look into some of those various, I don't know off the top of my head, and I'm not here I don't have an affiliate with any of them. So that's not, my agenda. I'm just sharing with you that I do know some of them are focused in that arena, or they're just too new to be able to, be interoperable. So that might be an alternative. I'm not opposed to people taking ownership of their data. I think that people having some of that information can actually be very helpful. That's part of how they sell it to us, right? Being able to track some of your biometric data, whether it be your temperature as it fluctuates, and it's very helpful for women tracking their cycles, certainly even just tracking the steps. Although I remember a time when I learned how far things were, and I could track mileage, by doing basic math. But, that seems to be an archaic practice these days. Right. So, but I'm not opposed to people having that kind of information, and it can be a way for people to improve their own health. What I'm opposed to is all of these companies having access to that data, and certainly for the government having access to the data, and really these supranational corporations, which are, people like Palantir, who are using it to collect, and Oracle now collecting our health data information, and where that can go, the potential ramifications downstream from that. That's what I'm concerned about. So we wrote this book because, a lot of people thought they were getting MAGA or MAHA. And what we realized is that a lot of people, this is really a betrayal of all Americans. This is not political. Right. It sounds that way. And a lot of people have come at us saying, oh, you're bashing Trump. And this isn't about Trump. This agenda long preceded Trump. Unfortunately, it is being quite fast in the acceleration under Trump. It's kind of lightning speed, Operation Warp Speed on steroids, so to speak. Right. So that's unfortunate, but I don't think it's about Trump. Unfortunately, a lot of the policies that he and the executive orders and the regulatory infrastructure that he is laying out is advancing this agenda very rapidly.
I was going to ask you really quickly. Do you think, because I know you're talking about how it was this marketing pitch, MAGA or MAHA, that was essentially a Trojan horse. Do you think that Trump himself was fooled by this, or do you think that he's a key player in this fake sales pitch, in a sense, if that makes sense?
I'll be very honest. I go back and forth. He's an older guy. Yeah. I think there's a framework. And you can pull it off of the CIA.gov. I talk about this all the time. It's from mice to rascals. And I may have even shared this with you previously. I believe I have. But mice stands for money, ideology, coercion, compliance, coercion / compliance. And ego. And then I would add there's usually some sort of familial leverage, whether it's bloodlines or, using family as leverage. Mm-hmm. But this is how they now changed it. They said rascal is a better acronym, and it's very similar. It's like reciprocity, authority, and, again, they're still the same kinds of social proofing, right. Likeness is, it's very similar. But it was a document that explained how they go about seeking military leaders. And they don't use the term, but essentially it's change agents and assets. And they do talk about how it came from the OSS. And again, this is my inference, but it does look like it came out of the War Office Selection Boards, which was done under Tavistock during World War II. And this is a new testing methodologies that these psychologists had created. They call them, quote unquote, intelligence tests, but they're very different than a traditional aptitude test, like an IQ test. It's more about intellectual resiliency, which seems to me like people who would make great change agents. I have to read the document, but that is really what they're describing, although they don't use that term. So that is my interpretation, but it is what they describe. And so in that, I bring it up because, Trump he's a big personality. He's very easily flattered. He likes to have his ego stroked. He obviously likes money and cares about, accruing more of it, although he has quite a bit. Yeah. He's already quite affluent, and as is his family, but, he has his own meme coin, as does his wife. And he's, certainly trying to, seek whatever advantage he possibly can. So it makes him an easy target. That's my point in bringing this up. It makes him an easy target to manipulate for people who might have an agenda. I also personally don't believe you really get very high in any kind of infrastructure without some sort of compromise. I don't think you get to be president of, now they want to make it the CEO dictator, right? But essentially that's of one of the, most powerful countries in the entire world.
I didn't used to think that as much as I do now until I really started to work within conservative politics, writing for different publications and things like that. And even just at that level, I've seen how gate-kept things are, where you have to kind of keep your mouth shut about certain things or certain people, which we can get into in a little bit. But you have to play the game and compromise on some core reasons why you got into it in the first place in order to actually advance or get higher employment or get editorial positions or whatever it might be. It's pretty wild how it works. I don't think the average person realizes how controlled these environments actually are.
Yeah, so I think I have shared this, but I'll repeat it because that bears repeating. My analogy of the scaffolding. So typically when you're, let's say you're a construction worker and you're working on a very tall building, a skyscraper, you're harnessed, right? You're about to climb up that scaffold so that you can paint or work on the windows or whatever it may be. And when you're at the bottom, that harness is very loose. You barely know it's even there, right? You could unclip it and walk away entirely, no problem. You can move laterally. You can go up and down a few steps, and you've got some leeway. You start to get close to the top of that building. You may not know who's pulling the anchor down below, who's controlling the pulley, but those strings are tight. You're not going anywhere. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what happens to people, to organizations, to, entities as they climb the ranks. There's more firm control over them. And so sometimes people are witting operatives. They know full well, and when you're talking in terms of military intelligence assets, there's different levels of clearance. That's where the term Q comes from, right? It's the highest clearance. So those people are very well read in. They may not know the entire plan because it's still very compartmentalized, but they have a bigger scope of the broader picture and the, how things are integrated and what the big picture plan is. And then you have people who are lower down, who have lower clearances, and they don't necessarily know, but they're very siloed, they're very compartmentalized and hyper specialized, and they're there to do a specific task.
Yeah.
And so they know a certain amount, but they know what they need to know. And I think this happens across the board. You have certain people who know more, but they might not know everything. But then you have people who are just the so-called useful idiots, right?
Yeah.
Or the naive dupes, as I believe it was Stalin called them that. But they're there to serve. They serve their role, but they might not realize they're serving their role. But there's still strings being pulled on them. So you have various levels of this across the board. So as far as Trump, I also think what's going on with the technology, to him, he's excited about it, but I don't think he really sees the ramifications long term of what these technologies could actually do and what it means for the future of humanity, the United States, the world. Yeah. I think he has a broad understanding.
He seems to kind of, what you said before, just care about the dollar value that's being added to whatever his business might be or the American economy in general. And I
think he's very short-sighted about it. And he's not a stupid man, so this is not to be derogatory. He's inside his bubble, and he's working within the framework that's familiar to him, and he's also being catered to and targeted in very specific ways, whether it be to his ego, whether it be financially, or whether it's leverage over his family. There's various modalities, but I think they have levers over him. I just don't think it's possible that they don't. So people who think that he's completely running the show, I think that's very naive on both sides. The people who think that he's, trust him, he's got the plan, he's playing 10. But then the other side, the people who think like it's all his fault and they blame him for everything, Orange Man bad or Orange Man Jesus. It's like, it's between. And I think both are kind of ludicrous. And I just don't think they're, reflect reality at all.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of that. I have some friends personally who kind of fall into that, like, he's playing 5D chess with everybody. And I'm like, is he? I don't know. Like, the more time goes on, the more I don't think that that's even remotely true. And you're right about his ego, where it's like, he just seems to like anybody who likes him. This has been how it's been for a long time. And he'll support or, refuse to rebuke when he probably should certain people or certain agendas if it's done so by people who are constantly stroking his ego. And even with JD Vance, JD Vance was a loud opponent of his for a long time. He's part of the Never Trump movement, and then all of a sudden he changes teams and is all pro Trump, and Trump is amazing and this and that, and now Trump loves him. And it's just reinforcing this bubble that you're speaking about, and it's quite concerning. I'm not going to lie. But
yeah, so we felt that this book was very important because of the Orange Man bad and Orange Jesus kinds of narratives that a lot of people on the right are just trusting. They're kind of blindly worshiping or pacified, and then a lot of people on the left hate Trump and hate the administration, but for all the wrong reasons. Yeah. So we wanted people to understand that really a lot of people are busy arguing politics and culture wars, and they don't have a scope of how those are being utilized to usher in the technocracy. So Brzezinski very famously talked about how Marxism would be a stepping stone. He was not a Marxist at all. He was not a fan of Marxism. He was not a pro-commie in any sensibility at all. But he understood that it would be utilized as a stepping stone to usher in technocracy. And that is very much what we're seeing. So while people are very busy arguing about, different culture wars and arguing about left and right Hegelian dialectics and arguing about fascism versus communism, the technocracy is being rolled out. And technocracy is a totalitarian, tyrannical infrastructure unlike any that I think most people can even possibly begin to fathom.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that in the previous episode about the dialectic that we're kind of being thrown in the middle of, and people are sitting here constantly debating, like what you said, fascism and communism and all of these things and these different culture wars, and they don't realize that they're being purposely agitated towards this like third way, this third way politic that is encroaching on us. I think the third way politic is obviously what you're saying here, and with your book, it's this technological, technocratic, authoritarian control over everybody, where they have everything, they know everything about you, they have your health data, they have everything you could possibly, all the information you could possibly give to someone, they have full control. And this is where it's heading. I think people need to realize that in the midst of all the culture wars and everything, this is where they're slowly agitating us towards. Because I think that, and I think that's exactly right. With the idea of the Hegelian dialectic, there's the antithesis, there's the synthesis, and all this, and they're pushing us towards that exact end. And again, it's not fun for people to hear on the right, but this is what MAGA is sort of serving. In a sense,
yes, it is what MAGA is largely serving, and I know it's hard to hear, and I see it over and over again, and it's very, very frustrating. It's sometimes the people who think they're the most aware who are advancing these agendas the most, which is, I don't claim to have all the answers or know everything. I'm certainly not omnipotent or omnipresent, but, I am aware of this technocratic agenda. And so when I see, we all have our blind spots, but when I see some people who think they're so aware of what's going on in these culture wars and, they have all the answers politically, it's like, you are totally missing how this is churning the dialectic towards the technological singularity. These technocrats do not care about politics. Historically, they never have. Technocracy Inc. is a movement that started in 1932, Columbia University, and it was a economic movement. Mm-hmm. And their definition was that it is the science of social engineering. So they have never cared about politics. They actually say that in their definition.
It's a tool. Yeah.
It's cool. They say in their definition in Technocrat magazine, 1937, I posted this on X and in my articles repeatedly. And it is on the cover. It is on technocracy.news, which is Patrick Wood's website. He has it like on the front page. So you can go and check it out there, or one of my articles or my posts, because I've blasted it constantly. But so the science of social engineering, and it's an economic movement because it was a response to the Great Depression, where they thought it would create efficiency and abundance. What do we keep hearing from Elon Musk? How we're going to live in this abundance, right? No, they're going to live in abundance. So we're going to be under a conditionally based income, and we're going to be replaced because it is a post-human vision. But it's between this economic kind of infrastructure and blueprint and social engineering that they're fomenting this technocratic, plan and technocratic governance and technocratic society. But they said from the beginning, they don't care that there's no room for politicians. There's no room for racketeers or racketeering or for prices, which is, a capitalistic type of a society and economy. And you see this from these technocrats. I will take Elon just as an example. A lot of people see him as the darling of the right. He's their free speech savior, and he's the, working with Trump on Doge. And I could go on and on about all of that. And we have a whole chapter on Doge in our book. But all this just to say, historically, Elon has, he was not an American citizen for a long time, but historically he has advocated or voted Democrat. And it was not until he's, became part of this Trump administration, suddenly he's on the quote unquote right. But he doesn't care about politics. This is
it's the tool. Yeah.
It's a tool. Is it all about advancing technocracy?
It's whichever lever of power he's closest to, and he can leverage for himself.
That's right.
It seems to be where it's going. And I would say the same with, we look at JD Vance and his relationship with Palantir and Peter Thiel, and we've talked about that before. It's the same thing. I don't think, this is why you see the random flip even with JD Vance from, oh, I hate Trump. And then the next day, oh, I love him. And now I'm his VP. And it's like, this isn't like a principled political move. This is an advantageous technocratic move that they're trying to, again, it's just get close to the lever of power, whatever's popular, use culture in order to gain power in the first place, and popular opinion with the people, and then go from there to funnel us into this third way. It's pretty scary. I'm not gonna lie.
Scary. 2026 midterms are going to be very interesting. I have talked quite a bit about Operation Phoenix. I've laid that out in my Phoenix Conspiracy article. I actually linked their Google Doc where they talk about flooding. They don't use the term flooding Congress. That's my term, but they essentially say they're going to flood Congress with these quote unquote independents. But when you go down that list, they are, as Patrick Wood likes to say, arch technocrats. So that is what they are. There is no denying it. They are arch technocrats. They are not independents who are, just outside the two-party duopoly, which is what they keep parroting. That's a narrative that they're espousing. Yeah. And not that I disagree that there's a two-party duopoly. There's absolutely a dialectic between the left and the right, and they use it repeatedly in order to steer the masses. However, this is being, again, hijacked in order to foment a synthesis, right? This new concretization towards technocracy, because they are all technocrats. And they're using the term democracy to do it. They keep talking about, we need democracy. We're not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. But what they mean by democracy is things like synergistic democracy, liquid democracy, quadratic voting, ranked choice voting. It's all about AI, which they say will increase pluralism. But they don't mean pluralism the way that the founding fathers talked about pluralism. They're talking about pluralism as in direct access through AI. But of course, we're not going to have direct access. Remember, you've all know Harari said voting's a thing of the past. This free choice. You don't have any freedom of choice. You don't have free will. That's an illusion. It's a thing of the past. And voting will be taken over by AI. That is the whole agenda of the AI World Society, which is the vision for the UN Centennial, which is 2045. When does Ray Kurzweil say the singularity?
The best. That's what it comes down to with these people. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. When does he think that the singularity is near? It's 2045. When does Jim Rutt say that the proto game B is going to be? It's 2045. All of these technocrats across the board are talking about 2045. And, that sounds far away, but we're in 2026. We're 4 years away from their 2030 agenda. Yeah. What are they doing this week in Davos? And this whole narrative, sorry, I'm just going to finish my rant with this.
No, this is great.
But this Promethean action, these LaRouchians, who I spent the better part of the several last months of last year arguing with on my Substack. So everybody can go check that out and see that I was really a little ahead of the curve on this because I knew what their agenda was. And it's not because I'm prescient. It's because I was in the thick of it and I was seeing it in real time, how it was unfolding and what the agendas they were pushing so heavy-handed was, they're all about BRICS. They're all about the Belt and Road Initiative. And I could see them co-opting narratives in order to further that agenda. So they use very salacious kind of fodder. They'll talk about occultism and Gnosticism, and they'll drip some things that are very, real in terms of historicism. But then what is their end goal? Where are they steering you? What is the purpose of that narrative? And what is the purpose of those articles and all the podcasts and all that material? Is just to suck you in to what they're trying to steer you toward. And this Promethean action, this Susan Conquista, who's gone all over, she's gone pretty viral recently on X and various other platforms. But it's like a cute-hearted narrative about how we should trust Trump because he's going to be the lion in the lion's den. He's the lion fighting the globalist agenda. No, he's building the technate. And he's using, she says some things that are true. Yes, historically, the Anglo-American establishment has used the cartels to fund their operations. And, of course, all of these oligarchs work hand in hand with the dark markets. That's historically true. I don't deny that. However, that's not what this is about. They're using that just like they're using the narrative of Venezuela. We're capturing the commie in order to capture the land so that we can capture the resources and build the technate. That technate map, this is from, this is the Technocracy study course, Hubert. And they right on the cover here, you can see this is the technate. This is the map of the technate, the North American technate. Anybody who's read Orwell's 1984 remembers Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, right? Oceania is always at war with Asia. Well, what does it look like? It looks like we've got three big technates forming. We've got the North American Union, which is Greenland, Canada, South America, Mexico, Venezuela. What is Trump talking about, right? Taking on all of those various regions in order to build this technate. Then you've got, it looks like Russia's going to take over Europe and build the technate there. Russia's already a technocracy. China, it looks like will have control over the global south when China's already a technocracy. And the global south has been groomed to be human capital for a very long time. I would argue the past several decades. Part of the UNESCO agenda has been putting every single child on a blockchain ledger from birth. Like we have a birth certificate now, they're doing blockchain ledger from birth. And that is a UNESCO agenda. You can go look it up, but they started it in Africa. So they've already been doing these kinds of experiments, and China is largely at the helm of, taking over the global south. So that looks like where we're going. It does not look like he's fighting the oligarch. What it looks like is he's building the technate right here at home.
Yeah. Wow. I was going to ask you about the Venezuela thing that came to mind while you were talking is, what was this all? And you kind of answered that for me there. It's like, people, there's a good sentiment behind, I could see why people would be supporting, for the sake of the Venezuelan people, the overthrow of a communist dictator. But there's obviously, again, they'll use something good. I think this seems to be the consistent theme, is they'll use something good that the people in a general sense could support, like getting rid of a abusive communist dictator, to really funnel us towards the end goal of why they're doing that in the first place. So the reason why these politicians are doing this, let's say Trump and his administration, isn't because they genuinely hate communism and they want to see people free and they want to see people thriving and they want to see people have autonomy in their own country. I don't think that's the reason. It's as far as what you're saying, right? The reason sorry, go ahead.
No, go on. Sorry.
That was basically it. Like, so the reason is to funnel us towards this technocratic system, this global system.
Yes. So it is typically what they do. You see this with politicians all the time. They throw you a bone, so they'll give you something. I mean, like RFK Jr. has done some good things with MAGA, I mean, I like the vaccine schedule that's changed. I have some gripes with the food pyramid, but it's a major improvement from the last one. So, there are things that are great.
No more Lucky Charms at the top.
Right. Yeah. I mean, some little common sense things that our ancestors knew, which is basic common sense. But it's not perfect, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. And we should cheer on and champion the things that are, the bones they do throw us. I mean, I'm not saying throw out the baby with the bathwater at all. But that's absolutely right. I think that they're using this, which of course I don't want to see the Venezuelan people under tyranny and under this, abusive communist dictatorship. So I absolutely support them being freed and having, the potential for true liberty. But I don't think that's what this is about. I think they're using that in order, as you said, to funnel us into this technate. And I think the great evidence for that is that you have this movement in South America, which was largely in Venezuela, actually, the FSP, which is the Foro San Paulo. This has been going on for decades, and they are totally in bed with the cartels. And it is a communist infiltration that had plans to infiltrate into the United States. And has anybody been talking about it? I know very few people who've been talking about it at all, and it's been going on for literally decades. So why now? why now suddenly are we all concerned about, the communist abuse in South America when we have this huge obligation to step in and take over? And he said we're going to take control of Venezuela in the interim, right? Why are we taking control over them? Like, that doesn't sound like we're liberating them. It sounds like there's an agenda there. So the Forest and Paulo is interesting because, again, the Promethean action seems to have this weird alignment with them, which you wouldn't think they would, because they've taken this weird, cutarded, like Trumpian kind of a stance. But they're very aligned on the pro-BRICS and the Belt and Road Initiative. And so I think, again, they drip things that are true, they weaponize the truth. It's essentially paltering.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how does BRICS play into this Western technocrat agenda exactly? Because we always hear, it's the United States versus China, it's the West versus China, it's the West versus Russia,
China versus East Asia.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, here we go. So I think that they're already a technate, and I think people tend to. The narrative is that China and Russia are like fighting for the liberation of their own people, and they're not in lockstep with the globalist agenda. I don't think there's any evidence to support that. I think that couldn't be further from the truth. There was actually a biannual, Lucis Trust, which is the spiritual consultancy for the UN. They have a consultancy status, and it came out of Alice Bailey's Lucifer Publishing, but that was a little too on the nose. So a year later, they changed the name to Lucis Trust. And so this is a new age kind of spiritual organization that consults with the UN. They send out a biannual letter. And in their last letter, they talked about how the BRICS economy was essentially the divine economy. Now, I mean, they don't literally say that, but they did talk about divine economy, and they did talk about BRICS. And you can kind of read between the lines that that's basically what they were alluding to. So they're very supportive of BRICS. And I think, again, BRICS is building a technate. It's a central bank digital currency, essentially. And if you actually look, we have a whole chapter in our book. We have a chapter in our book about the regulatory infrastructure that Trump is laying out for cryptocurrencies here in the United States. Although he banned central bank digital currency, and then last year, January 23rd, it was, of 2025, he rescinded it. So basically just giving, just proving my point that it was all part of Hegelian dialectical theater, which is what I said from the beginning. But he's laying out this regulatory infrastructure for Congress-backed digital currencies. And so we have a whole chapter on that. But then the final chapter, chapter 11, is on the new international economic order, which is what the Trilateral Commission was always all about. And they are arch technocrats. And, that was founded in 1973. And Rockefeller, Brzezinski, Carter was part of that. And they, had always said it was about creating a new international economic order. And all of these central bankers are moving towards this cryptocurrency kinds of infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And who is leading the world in fintech is the Islamic nations. They are the leader in fintech. So right now, Western central banks are actually subordinate to Sharia law. They have to be to play ball with the fintech.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So how,
technique, I don't think that BRICS is part of the Western technique. However, there is a whole narrative that we have to beat China, right? There's an arms race. If you read the AI action plan, and we talk about this in the book as well, the AI action plan that Trump has rolled out, the third pillar is all about this stack that he has to export to the world. So again, we're the technate. They're using our technology, Silicon Valley technology, globally, for various technocratic means. Mm-hmm. But he keeps saying we have to do this to compete with China. Now, recently, Trump talked about how, 6G is around the corner. If people recall, he was the 5G president. He laid out in his last term, he laid out an entire regulatory policy for 5G. If you read that, it extends itself to 6G. It's not limited to 5G. Now, 6G is slated for 2030, and China is currently leading the world in R&D on 6G technology. They do say 2030, and we are not there yet. We are definitely not there. And Trump has exhibited that he doesn't really have a full command of a true understanding of what 6G actually is. But I do think he would, because again, he likes having his ego stroke.
Yeah.
He would love nothing more. And he's still bragging about being the 5G president.
He's still bragging about warp speed, and it's just, He
would love nothing more than to be the 6G president. I don't think he really understands what 6G means, what the ramifications of that are. However, he does understand that we are in essentially an arms race, an AI arms race, and a Cold War with China. And a lot of this is an AI kind of
totally.
Competition.
Yeah.
And, back in 2024, the Chatham House was doing symposiums on Cold War with China. So, this again is more evidence that the globalists are all up on this. Like, this is not, a lot of these narratives are being fomented in order to create the technological singularity. So do I think some of these narratives are being amped up? Absolutely. But is there really competition? Absolutely. Both things can be simultaneously true. It's not mutually exclusive.
Right. Because I even hear, you especially hear from more the woke right crowd that, Russia and Putin and, the CCP, they're standing against the globalists and NATO and the United Nations and, the West.
Playbook.
They're standing against Klaus Schwab and they're standing against Soros and yada, yada. You hear that all the time from these people. And
you wouldn't have thought that they would have been so alive today, but they are. I mean, that narrative, it's straight out of LaRouche. That's what this is. It's just a repackaging of the LaRouchean narratives.
So walk through briefly, if you can, what is the main threat with 6G in 2030?
So I did a couple of, and I will put out some articles on it. I haven't been doing Substack as much over the past few weeks, but we'll be getting back into it. But I did do a very long, it's essentially an article on Twitter. So you can find that if you just put in 6G, you'll see my thread on that. But the main, so 6G is where they talk about how you will be the antenna. Humans will be the antenna that powers 6G. And this is not like science fiction. This is not, I know it sounds crazy. However, there is the University of Amherst, Massachusetts article on it going back to 2020, which actually was titled Humans as an Antenna to Power 6G Technology. They are not the only ones who did this study, obviously, but I think they wrote it in the most layman, accessible kind of jargon. Some of the others are really very heavy scientific kinds of terminology that might be more difficult for people who don't have that background to discern. So I recommend people reading that. But there's also the body wireless activity data cryptocurrency patent, which 6G will make very much a reality. 6G will can operate through sensors. They can operate through nanobiotechnology. So the Internet of Nanobio thing. And really what I think 6G will accelerate is we're seeing the rise of, I've talked to you before about these network states. And I think that's a huge part of what's going on in Greenland, by the way, right? Praxis is a network state heavily invested by the whole Thiel Andreessen crowd, and it's an extension of Prospera. And they actually say that it is the original model for the network, a true network state in the Balaji Srinivasan sense of the word. And they're proposing it to be in Greenland. They have done so since 2019. So I do think that's a component of what's going on there, because Trump's talking about making it a freedom city. Freedom city is really just another term for smart city, 15-minute city, whatever the various marketing labels are, but it's a smart city. And so with 6G, you have the vision for the AI world society is essentially you'll have all these various nodes that are connected on a grid. So they keep using the term decentralized. However, if you read Balaji Srinivasan's book, he says decentralized towards a re-centralized center. And I think that's exactly what all of these DAOs are, decentralized or autonomous organizations, and where you have, governance structure, of course, AI governance structure, in these various decentralized CEO type of startup companies, network states, but they're all about creating socio-technical, cyber-physical, cybernetic organisms, where we are, in like a tokenized, gamified society that seems decentralized, but it's all interconnected. And they talk about with the AI world society, they say that Ukraine will be the central node for all of these other, for the UN, they call them C40 cities because it's all about, quote unquote, the green agenda. Although the green agenda, it has nothing to do with the green agenda. Right. It's actually all about social impact finance. That's really what it's about. So when you look at these 17 sustainable development goals, that's the part that people don't talk about, but it's really there. What is ESG? ESG isn't really about the environment. I mean, right now, all of these so-called, tech bros who claim that they're all about green energy and that the technology is going to save the planet. Yeah. What is Elon Musk doing? Just to take one example, he's building his Colossus supercomputer in Memphis, Tennessee, in my state, and he's using methane turbine, gas, which is, and they've already proven it's a violation of the Clean Air Act. He's using clean drinking water. All of these data centers require clean drinking water because it can't be anything else. It has to be fresh water because otherwise it would be corrosive and breed bacteria. So what is happening? You're creating droughts in these, a lot of times it's underprivileged areas, because they're, I don't know why, but it's not always. Some places have fought back because they have the means to do so. And I hope more of them do push back against these data centers because they're egregious. And they're not necessary. This whole scale at all cost narrative with these data, and it's become the whole ethos of Silicon Valley was born out of Sam Altman's idea that everything has to be scaled at all costs. And so you need to collect as much data as possible and use as much space as possible, which isn't essential. They don't actually need to do that in order to advance and train their AI.
Yeah, there's one of these giant Meta data centers right down the road, maybe 20 minutes down the road from my house right now. I don't know if it's fully complete as far as building it, but it's close. They tore down all this land for miles. There's it's just ridiculous. Like this town that's, 20-ish minutes down the road from me, they've been wildly upset about it for the last couple of years ever since this got announced.
They're making noise, talk to their legislators, get their local municipality involved, talk to their sheriff, create bills and legislators. They can get together and draft legislature. People should get involved and push back. There have been data centers that have been shut down. I don't off the top of my head know of which to point people to, but there have been, and it has been because of the people, because of popular sovereignty, and that's what we need to emphasize.
So these data centers are essentially them building this grid for this technocratic system that's coming down the pipes. Is essentially what it is. It's the skeleton of it.
To collect all of our data to train these AI. Yeah, that's absolutely what's going on. And it's not that I'm promoting China here. Don't mistake me, but and I don't actually know if the narrative is even true because it's like we keep saying China is like master propagandists, and then suddenly they tell us one thing, and we're like, oh, then that must be true. So I don't know. But the narrative, if we take the narrative at face value, DeepSeek apparently used a fraction of the cost, a fraction of the data, and it took a fraction of the time, in order to launch. So if that's true, again, I don't know for sure if it's true, but if it is true, then that proves that this scale at all costs is not necessary. This is just, grandiose Silicon Valley accelerationism. That's all it is. So, and it's very unfortunate because, Trump did make it harder for Chinese students. And again, I'm not I'm not ignoring the fact that there are some real national security issues and there is a real competition. I don't ignore those realities. However, ironically, it actually benefited it actually benefited China, because I don't think that they would have been able to do what they did with DeepSeek if they didn't have that talent. And previously, that talent came here because they wanted to be a part of Silicon Valley, right? That was the dream for somebody who was going to be a software engineer or a computer scientist or an AI specialist, that they wanted to come here and be a part of Silicon Valley. But after after the restrictions, then a lot of them chose to stay home. And so they had access to that talent pool that they otherwise wouldn't have. So it's kind of ironic, and it's worth considering, because if we are really in some sort of arms race with China for AI, and it looks like that's the whole purpose of that, Golden Dome, then, these are things we should consider.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, what role, and I guess we sort of addressed this a little bit, but, people look at an organization, let's say like Turning Point USA, which obviously that organization has been in the media nonstop since the tragedy with Charlie Kirk. But people look at an organization like that and they see that conglomerate and they think this is like the pinnacle of conservative politics and the pinnacle of, our movement and all of this. And then you have their now CEO, Erica Kirk, getting up there and, she's using her speech at America Fest to essentially give a commencement for JD Vance as the next president of the United States for 2028. And I'm looking at that and I'm just like, especially given all this information and the things we've talked about before, and I'm asking myself the same question with them. Do they know the role they're playing? Do they know what kind of fire they're playing with and what they're really selling, or are they being used as well? Just like, maybe even Trump himself to some degree, or other people in the administration. What do you think? What do you think the role of an organization like that is in all this equation?
So I think it's very, very complicated, actually.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And I certainly don't claim to have all the answers. I'm not privy to a lot of what I actually think is going on. I have no way of actually proving, although I am working on an article. It will take a while. And I've unfortunately had some, other obligations. So I haven't had as much time to focus on it as I would have liked, but I will be putting it out. So I have a lot of thoughts on what's going on with Turning Point. I have never been, I will just full disclosure, I've been very active. I did a lot of media for Turning Point. So certainly I'm not as in the know as maybe other people, but I was involved in the organization. I did go to many of their events. And so I had some, on the boots, kind of boots on the ground, kind of like, experiences with the organization. And I personally called them Grifter Point. That was my little name for them. I was very turned off by the fact that they would always ask me to put Charlie in my will. And I'm like, Charlie doesn't need my money. I think some of the things he's done, I don't want to undermine. He did some really incredible things. And, I met Charlie several times long before he was super famous. I wasn't always a fan of how he behaved to people who really helped him along the way, just because I knew some of those people. And the bigger he got, it rubbed me kind of the wrong way. That's not to say I know he might have been a wonderful person. I think he did do some great work, but these are just my personal experiences. Yeah. But this is what I will say. So for 2028, so JD Vance is obviously Peter Thiel's protege, and they're putting him up, it does look like, as a potential run for the primaries, the Republican primaries. Marco Rubio will probably be the other one. And a lot of people are not looking at this, but Larry Ellison, who's the man behind Oracle, is equally a major, major heavy hitter and arch technocrat. Larry Ellison actually offered to buy out Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel said no. This was, I forgot when it was. It was several years ago, but he wanted to buy out Palantir. And of course, these types of personalities, neither of them believe in competition, meaning they only believe in monopoly domination. This is also the ethos of Rockefeller as well. Again, the Trilateral Commission, right? So I don't think these people take well to having been said no to. But Larry Ellison has bankrolled Marco Rubio. So that is his, pick for, and I do think they will try and put them up against each other for 2028. So it's going to be very interesting. We have to get through the midterms and see what they do. But
so two technocrats putting their politician out there, and we have to choose between the two of them.
Yeah, there is some competition, and Oracle is a huge part of Project Stargate, and Oracle is right now vying for huge defense contracts and getting into the same military defense space that Palantir is. Also, the same health data collection space that Palantir is as well. Of course, they're doing their whole AI precision medicine and their sea illness injections, and that he talked about at the announcement of Project Stargate. So I won't go too much more into detail on that. But I do, that's what I see coming down the pike. And I think people should be aware that that's going on, because now we're going to have some competition in that arena, but both of them are very concerning with what they're doing.
Definitely.
So as far as turning point, I think there is a huge technocratic agenda. And I think that it has been there all along. Do I think all of the people are aware? Probably not. I think a lot of these pundits and influencers, like I said, I call it the grifter point. They take these people, catapult them to fame. It's a huge vehicle for publicity, for speaking engagements, for gleaning and growing audiences, and the attention economy, essentially.
Oh, totally.
So it's a great vehicle for that. They did have, and I know this firsthand because we were invited. We did not go, but we were asked multiple times, when I say we, my husband and I, to join them for some of these kind of swinger type events that they were infamous for. And I had heard about that, but we actually were asked many times. So I know that goes on. Now, typically when these kinds of things go on, there's blackmail involved. Right? This is leverage. That's usually what that's about. It's
Hollywood 2.0 at this point.
That's Hollywood. That's politics. That's the Epstein. That's exactly what's going on there. It's really a vehicle for leverage of power and blackmail, and also I would argue trauma-based mind control as well. That's a huge part of that as well. Now, I can't speak to the details. Like I said, I did not go to any of these events. And, when I first
honestly,
pardon?
Said good for you. Honestly, it's a lot of people would just to,
like, well, I was kind of in shock the first time because we had heard about it, like rumors, and we kind of, like tucked that away. We didn't really believe it. We're just kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. And then the first time somebody invited us, we looked at each other like, what? Is this real? Like, and then it happened a few times. So I'm just throwing that out there when that, I'm not denying that some people may just, that's their idea of a good time. It's not my business. That's their thing. But I do think often we can't ignore that when those things happen, they are vehicles and, it's a infrastructure for blackmail, leverage, control, and trauma-based mind control. So that's, that was going on. And I don't need to go into all of what's going on with Erica Kirk. There's so much going on where people are releasing some of her backstory. And I do think she was an op from the beginning. How much she knows, how much she doesn't know. Again, I don't know her personally. I'm not privy to these sort of things.
Right.
But I do know that her mother is involved in this E3 technology. This is her company. That's actually the reason why they moved to Arizona from Ohio. And you can see this on, Erica has done videos talking about this where, she says that that's why they moved, because her mom was doing defense contracts with her company, E3 Tech, for Department of Defense and Homeland Security. And when I did some looking into it, they are very involved in cultural linguistics and human terrain systems. Human terrain systems is very reminiscent of Operation Phoenix, CIA Operation Phoenix. It's also very reminiscent of Helm's work. And this is, this is what I will be elaborating on. And they actually canceled it because the anthropologists deemed it unethical. An ethical violation. So the military has canceled it, but Stanley McChrystal was very involved. He wrote a book, so this is not, classified information. He wrote a book called Teams of Teams, and he talks about these human terrain systems and human terrain theory. And I think a lot of what's going on now, I could go, there's so many avenues you can go in with what's going on with the organization, the various funding from, people like John Mappin, Scientologists and British connections and, Farmer, and the list goes on and on.
Right.
But in terms of the cultural mapping, we're seeing an extension, right? How many new chapters have opened up? What is their connection to organizations and belief systems like NAR, right? Rob McCoy is, So NAR is the New Apostolic Reformation, who believes in Seven Mountain Mandates, which is, when you really think about Seven Mountain Mandates, it's very similar, only coming from the Christian, quote unquote, right. I don't think they're either Christian or conservative, but, under that banner, the Christian right, quote unquote, it's kind of the same thing as the Long March Through the Institutions, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
There's a society.
I'm actually working on a video for this channel, just like a solo video going through what NAR is and all of that. So stay tuned, everybody, for that. So, but go on.
And we have a chapter, the rise of the new state religion in our book. So we do touch on that a little bit as well. But if you think about all these various connections, these tentacles, and how many new chapters are opening up across not just the country, but the world, and this new faith explosion that's happening under Turning Point, it's really primed for. Let me phrase it this way. Again, I don't have all the evidence, right now, and I probably never will. I will just caveat that because I think a lot of it's probably, the human terrain system is military,
right.
tool, and military theory. So some of it is probably not going to be at my fingertips and my disposal. It's probably classified kind of information, but I can connect dots and people can do what they want with that information. So I will just say that if you're looking at somebody who has a very strong background in cultural linguistics and cultural mapping and human terrain systems, human terrain theory, and you're seeing all of these various groups that are launching, and they have a shared ethos that's being spread, and it's very, a strong ideological and religious fervor that's attached to it. And now you've got a trauma that's attached to it because their martyr, Charlie Kirk, has been right. So they've been mass scale traumatized, which is a great trauma bonding kind of a vehicle. It's also great, again, trauma based mind control tool.
Totally.
And so you have this potential for cultural mapping. Using various kinds of technologies that we have, like, geofencing type of technologies. When you put this all together, it looks like, what are they trying to do? They're trying to create smart villages. When I talk about these socio-technical, cyber-physical, cybernetic organisms in a tokenized gamified society, this is the perfect testing ground and blueprint to do some of that groundwork.
Yeah. And what I've noticed, just in my observation is just how good they've been at, and I think people are starting to see through it a little bit more, thankfully, but how good they've been at using the tragedy, just like what you're saying, to create this weird trauma bond. I think that's a great way I've never thought about it in those terms exactly, but I think that's a great way, honestly, to put it. This trauma bond with the audience that creates this dynamic to where if you oppose Turning Point as an organization, or if you say anything critical about Erica Kirk's past or some of the things she's done or said publicly in the last couple months, well, they'll lump you in with those who are a threat, in opposition to the trauma bond that they have with the audience. And it's this like it's this bizarre control mechanism, the psychological control mechanism that doesn't allow people to think critically, that doesn't allow people to be honest about what they're actually seeing and observing. And people can take it too far. Obviously, look at Candace Owens. She's just gone. She's a whole other story in and of herself. And maybe she's playing a part of this to aid and abet the trauma bond in a weird sort of way. So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think so. I think part of what's going on with her is she is playing a role, and she's playing a role to look as crazy as possible.
She's doing it. She's doing a good job.
And I think that the people who follow along as things get more, more revealed over time, I think then they will be discredited. And it's like, oh, you follow this, lunatic. And so you're kind of crazy. You're not trustworthy. I actually think, she's playing a very specific role. And I do too. It's pretty astounding to me how many people have bought into it.
Especially when her and Erica met together, that was my like, okay, this is like something.
The opposition is to lead it. I
was like, this is too obvious at this point.
It's just, it's all theater. I mean, it's dialectical theater. I mean, the ladies are off having brunch, like, they're having brunch with their, fancy, drivers and whatever. And we're all sitting here like fighting each other, like Team Erica, Team Candace. And it's like,
it's just ridiculous. And I think if you kind of take, and this is kind of the position that I found myself in a lot of times in just the quote unquote political arena over the last couple of years, is like, I find myself whenever there's these kind of squabbles going on, not siding with anybody. And then I'm just like extra politically homeless at this point where I have nowhere to be. And you could probably relate to that. So I'm just like, I don't like any of this. Yeah. But that's how I feel with Turning Point. I see, based off the things we've talked about in the past and with the stuff we're talking about here with the technocracy and all these key players. And then you see who's behind the politicians that organizations like Turning Point are propping up on a regular basis. It's these exact same people. And you start putting all these dots together and you really realize the mass deception that's happening. And
mass deception.
It's all under the illusion of these cultural squabbles and these cultural wars and this Team Candace, Team Erica, or different cultural things that pertain to conservative politics to get conservatives who otherwise, I guarantee you, if you present this information to your average, let's say, Turning Point fan who is just cares about the pro-life cause or just cares about some other general conservative cause, they're going to be, if they're being honest with themselves at least, they're probably going to think twice about supporting the organization after that. But like what they have, but what they've done, going back to exactly what you were saying with this trauma bond strategy, is they've made it so they've made this emotional tie so strong after this tragedy with Charlie Kirk to those people, to those kinds of people, that I feel like it's almost impossible to get through to a lot of these people. I've tried. I've tried on Twitter. I've tried in real life. It's just like there's no getting through. It's like it is brainwashing. You can see it when you. Yeah.
And it's like blind idol worship is what it is.
Yeah.
So I have dear friends, I mean, like in real life who, it's some of these personalities come to their town and I mean, they are just, it's like their favorite rock star is coming there's no sense that I can talk into them at all. And anything those people say, it's the gospel. It may as well be the gospel. And it's kind of heartbreaking to watch because I can see, again, not that I don't have my own blind spots. I do. I don't know what they are, my blind spots, but, if I try to, shine the light on where I think some of these misconceptions may lie, or maybe where somebody should be a little bit cautious, I am met with so much wrath. Because, how dare I criticize their idol? That's what it is. It's idol worship. And to me, it's just a little bit crazy coming from these Christians. Because isn't idolatry one of the number one things? Yeah, it's like
the whole thing.
I'm a little
Uh,
confused, but not for me to judge. It's just
right.
confusing, baffling, and it is disconcerting because you want to try and expose and shine light where there may be deception, and not for me to tell people what to believe or what to think, but just to say, hey, maybe we should ask some questions here and
Yeah.
look at the bigger picture. And yeah, it is frustrating. But yeah, I feel when you talk about being like homeless, I feel like it's like all sides hate me because I'm
Oh, me
just,
too.
you know,
It's
it's like yeah. So,
the amount of
and I,
friends in politics I have now is very, very, very small. I could count it on both hands, and that's probably it. And it's if that even. And it's weird because when I first got into this, especially when I started writing, I was writing for the Federalist and then Not the Bee, and I've done writing for most of the writing as far as the woke rights stuff I've addressed has been with Christian Post, and Christian Post is great. I don't put them in this category, but
yeah,
the other two publications that I've written for, when I first started, it was like, oh, I'm part of this big team conservative and this is so cool and all this. And then, it didn't take long at all before I realized, oh, this is all about this Carl Schmittian friend enemy distinction game. And it's being used to funnel us into a direction that I, as a conservative, who's like a true conservative, don't want to participate in. And if you take that stand and you don't budge, you're going to find yourself with not very many friends in politics these days. It's just true. The whole sales pitch, like kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of the interview, with MAGA or with Maha or with conservative politics or with Turning Point USA, a lot of it is done behind that kind of Christian veneer. We're Christians. We love Jesus. We care about the Bible. We want to bring back Christian morals to society. And that's the cover. I'm here to tell everybody that is the sales pitch. That's not really the engine that's underneath the hood.
right.
And I think the more people realize that, the more of a chance we might have to actually break out of some of this stuff and properly resist some of this stuff. Because I think the more that we as conservatives latch on to these, really what we're explaining here, these technocratic funded organizations like Turning Point, we're just doing ourselves a disservice at the end of the day. We're not thinking long term, like what you said in the beginning of the interview with Donald Trump. And again, it goes to the voters too. We let our own egos be stroked, where
Yeah.
we want to be part of something big and fancy, and we want to be part of the let's like be part of the cool kids club and be part of the new Hollywood and go to the events and take photos with our favorite idols. And it's just like, it's so ridiculous.
It is. Yeah. The whole Mar-a-Lago scene.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
It's a show.
It's a show. I mean, you see it with these influencers. It's just cult of personality, So you've got again the idol worship, and those cults of those personalities serve to contain. That is what they are there to do. I'm not saying every single one of them is witting or somehow like a sinister operative. They don't all know what they're doing, but they certainly like the clicks, the shares, the money, the ego stroking, the invitations to the fancy events, and they go along to get along. And they, whether they're aware or not, they're advancing these narratives through these various silos and these containment spheres. So and I see it constantly. So I think people need to stop. They need to start adjudicating information itself. Remember, a broken clock is right twice a day. So, somebody you may despise or who maybe you think is off the wall may still have some valuable information, but you don't take it all as gospel. It is not the Bible. Like, that is not how you read it. You read it with discernment, like you should anything. And the same goes for your favorite influencer, media personality, whatever it may be. The most brilliant people, the most in the know, the most expertise and experienced people are still fallible. They're people. And so even
except
those
us, of course, but no, I'm kidding.
Of course, right? I've already admitted I have blind spots and I don't know what they are. my blind spots. But if you want to point them out to me, I will listen, because I can't see them.
Yeah.
So that's just how humanity works. That's part of being human. So I'm aware this does not absolve me at all. I'm certainly not impervious, and I'm a byproduct of my environment. So, we all fall for various psyops at certain times, but, and hopefully we evolve and we learn and we grow and, we start to see we can correct where we may have made mistakes along the way, and admit them, hopefully. But all this to say that even those people, they're going to be wrong too. So you need to use your discernment, and you need to look at information itself, adjudicate the information instead of glorifying or vilifying the source from which it came. And if everybody did that, I think we'd live in a very different society.
Very. Yep. And kind of to wrap up the interview here, I think that's exactly a good takeaway for people. Like, you hear all this information about technocracy and all these different organizations and all this stuff, and it probably feels pretty disheartening. In some sense, it is. I mean, it is. It's pretty depressing, and it's like, what can you really do about this? That's like this giant organism that is just this dark cloud over us, in a sense. But I think that's really the kind of baby step solution, is just start to be more discerning with who you listen to, what information you allow to, infiltrate your life and your worldview and your thinking. I'm a Christian, obviously, so I always tell people, like, if you're a Christian, turn off the internet and just start reading your Bible more. That is going to be way more beneficial. You're going to have the tools to discern then when you go into the culture and when you go into different political arenas or social arenas or whatever it might be. And you're going to be able to tell right from wrong way better than if you don't do that. I'm telling you right now from personal experience. I've had times in my life where I haven't been doing that. It's not, it's not the best. So,
well, anyways. The Bible warns about the technocracy. They call it the peace system. So
yeah, right. Exactly. So this isn't anything divorced from what the Bible kind of warns us about, what we're talking about here. But
I do want to I don't want to leave people. I'm not a doomer. I'm not here to black pill people. I am just here to help bring information so that people can use discernment. And, it's not for them to take me at face value. It's just to point them. And that's part of why we wrote this book. So I do want to say, I think there's a lot that people can do. I am not at all like black pilled. If I were, I would not, doing these shows, and as much as I enjoy talking to you, and I hope that the audience finds this valuable, this isn't like lucrative for me, and even the book is not like that's not what this doesn't do a whole lot for me, but it is a mission, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't think that there was hope for humanity, and I didn't think that there was, things that everyday people can do. So I just want to tell people that, the first thing they can do is definitely support independent, genuine, authentic researchers. We don't get everything right because we don't know everything. We're not omnipotent and omnipresent, but we are not controlled, and we are bringing forth what we think is valuable information. Arm yourself with the information. So, read books like this, read, whatever you can find that you think will help you to have better discernment. I would also that there's not a smoking gun solution. People always want that. They want me to tell them, like, okay, here's the smoking gun. It's the one off, you're one and done. It doesn't work that way. I personally believe every one of us was endowed with unique gifts, strengths, and talents, and that it's incumbent upon each of us to hone those, discover those, so that we can be a contribution to the world and to the society. And so therefore we also have passions and interests and the proclivities, and they're different for each of us. So each of us, we also have different resources. So whatever we are drawn to, that's where you should be taking action. And, as I was pointing out with the data center, if that is something in your area, get together with other like-minded people and, see what you can do to push back against it either growing or, being funded, or to shut it down entirely. That's something you can do. You can if you can cancel some of the bills that are being put forth locally, that makes a huge dent in their progress. So, take some action. I am not one to say, like, give up on the political system. I think we use it. I do think it's quite corrupt. I'm not saying it's not, but we actually have a lot more power locally than a lot of people think.
Yeah. I was going to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yep. If you want to say something to that,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna reemphasize at the local level how important that is. That's something I've been thinking about more. Like, okay, how do I get more involved at a local level? And because we can talk about national politics and all this stuff all day. There's not really a whole lot you can do at the national level as an individual person, but in your local town, you can get groups together and start to push back against some of this stuff if it starts to creep up in your area. And I think that's really the main way that this stuff is going to be defeated is at the local level. It need
Absolutely.
yeah. So, anyways,
There's also things you can do to limit the access that they have to your data. This is
yeah,
going to be huge moving forward. I mean, really, like part of this whole health agenda is about genomic data, and I think they are going to weaponize it. I think they want to create Brave New World, right? Well, what is the fourth industrial revolution? You will own nothing and be happy. I don't think we're going to be happy unless we come to love our servitude in Huxley's Brave New World.
yep,
And that is literally what they want to create. They want to create a stratified caste system based on genomic data. So imagine a world where, you get a premium insurance if you have certain genetics. This does not only impact you, but it impacts your posterity and your family.
yep,
So these are things you can start to ask questions like, who has ownership of this data? Can I localize it so that only I have access to it on a hard drive? You can, I pointed that out with the wearables. You can do things like that. I think that people can get involved, like the school boards is a great way. We saw that in 2020 with the mama bears getting involved in, the school boards, and they made a huge dent. Farmers, there's a lot farming. They're trying to implement all these climate smart property projects. There's an initiative for 2050, the Rockefeller Food Nerve Initiative, where they literally want to terraform all of agriculture, so it's completely synthetic. Farmers can stand up against this, especially locally. So I could go on and on. I also would say that, you talked about reading the Bible. I talk about, anybody who's followed my Substack and my, certainly on Twitter and a lot of my podcasts, I talk about metaphysics all the time. I'm not here to dispute theology, not that I have any disrespect for individual. I want people to hold fast to their religious beliefs, their theological beliefs. However, I think infighting does more disservice than it does benefit. But the metaphysics of the Bible is, the Aristotelian metaphysics that the Declaration of Independence was predicated upon. And that has been completely eradicated from our school system and our education and our culture. And that is something that you can learn yourself and instill in the future generations, in your children, your families. And it's something you can practice, because we can't have true civic duty until we understand those metaphysical foundations upon which our civics were predicated. So those are some things. I mean, the list is endless, but it's going to look different for every person. So figure out where your role is and, take action.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, anyways, guys, I'll link your book and your Substack and social media and all that in the description so people can follow and get your book and read it and all that good stuff. So, yeah, I appreciate you for hopping on again, Courtenay. I'm sure we'll do this again soon. So,
yeah, thank you.
Yep.